Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be continuing along our journey through the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. Today, talking about Chapter 13, How to Stop Procrastinating by Using the 2-Minute Rule. This is all going along with the third law of habit making that James has talked about, which is making things easy. If you guys remember last time, we talked about chapter 12, which was the law of least effort. And in this chapter, we talked about not picking easy habits, but making the hard habits very frictionless and removing obstacles to make those hard habits very easy. And we talked about a couple different ways to do that. One of the more significant ways to do that is priming your environment. So if you know you have a very busy work day, or if you know that you really want to, let's say, for example, read 10 pages every morning, well, then you set the book right there on the counter or right next to the coffee maker so that it primes you for the next morning when you wake up and you make your coffee. You don't have to go searching for the book. It's right there and you can just start reading. So that's what we talked about last time. Today, we're going to talk about this 2-minute rule and what this 2-minute rule is all about. And I think a very, very powerful way to make some habits stick. So in typical James Clear fashion, we talk about a anecdote at the beginning of this chapter, talking about Twyla Tharp, who was apparently one of the greatest dancers and choreographers of all time. And Twyla talks about how she began every day with a ritual. So she would put on her workout clothes, she would go down to the main floor, walk outside of her apartment complex or where she lived. She'd walk outside, hail a taxi, have the taxi take her to her gym, and then she would work out for like 2 hours. Now, this whole thing was not the ritual. The taxi, she said, was the ritual. Because, and I would even maybe go as far as to say everything before getting to the gym is the ritual. The gym in and of itself changes from day to day. So different people go to the gym. It's busier on some days than others. You do different workouts at the gym. Biceps, legs, maybe you run at the gym, etc. So your workouts change. But everything before that is kind of the same. You put out the workout clothes just like you do every day. You're in an environment that's more controlled and things don't change as much as at home. You're hailing a taxi. You're doing that same activity every day and you're riding in the taxi every day. It's something that is repeatable, consistent, and leads to other behaviors. And this is what we're going to talk about as far as being in that 2-minute rule. So we're going to get to that in a second, but anywhere between 40 to 50% of the actions that you do are habits, according to James, and he cites this was from previous studies. Habits, he says, are the entrance ramp to the highway. The habit leads you to your next behavior, and then that next behavior ultimately leads you to form your identity of who you are. So the habits are just the entrance ramp. It's easier to continue something than to start a brand new thing. So the habits are the easy thing to do, and once you're on the freeway or once you're on the road and the habits take you on the freeway, then whatever you're doing in that moment becomes easier to do, and it's harder to get off the freeway and start something brand new. Hopefully you guys are following the analogy there, and I think it's going to be more crystallized in a few moments here, but essentially James says that there's decisive moments in your life, not just in your life, but day to day, multiple times a day, where depending on what decision you make, it's going to dictate the next subsequent behavior. So you come to a fork in the road, and that fork in the road is going to dictate whether you have a very productive day or a very unproductive day. And it's as simple as the choice you make in the very initial beginning stages, that first habit, that entrance ramp. And again, as an analogy here, when you order from a menu from a restaurant, you do have a ton of options on the menu, but you also have a lot of options that are not at your disposal. There's a lot of foods you can't get. Now, what was the decisive moment in shaping your choice of order? Well, it was the restaurant you chose. So the decisive moment on what shapes your order is it happens even before you enter into the restaurant. So all in all, and I highlighted this here at the bottom of the slide, habits are the entry point, but they're not the end point. Now, this is going to lead us into what is this 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule is kind of birthed from the fact that a lot of people try to do too much too soon. So you try to take like a very daunting behavior and you try to just accomplish it right away, like quitting smoking. Nobody just quits. I guess maybe some people would, but most people aren't just going to just stop smoking one day and then just continue it for the rest of the years of their life. But what you can do is you can scale a habit down to an easy, minute portion of it. And that's what's the 2-minute rule. The 2-minute rule is basically saying when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. You should break down that habit into what you can really just do in 2 minutes. So if your goal is to read before bed, you shouldn't say, okay, yeah, I'm going to read, 10 pages before bed. Which, yes, for some people it's doable right away, but break that down further. Make it into the 2-minute rule. What can I do within 2 minutes? Well, maybe I could just read 1 page, right? So your goal isn't to read 10 pages before bed. It's just, hey, just read 1 page. Or, your goal isn't to study for the exam. The goal is just, hey, just open up your notebook. Something super simple, really quick. You can do it in not even 2 minutes, just 2 seconds. If you want to run 7 miles, hey, I don't want to run 7 miles. I'll just tie my shoes. Put my running shoes on and tie them up. Easy. Again, you can do it within a few seconds. You don't even need 2 minutes. The goal of all this is to eventually run those 7 miles. It's to eventually study for the exam or read 10 pages before bed. What James says is that once you start doing the right thing, it's easy to continue doing it. Once you're on the freeway, it's easy just to continue on the freeway. So what you're doing is you're making a new habit within the first 2 minutes easy so that momentum takes over, and that then you keep doing it and doing that habit until you eventually get to what your ultimate goal was. The first 2 minutes are easy, but what follows is the challenging part. But again, make it through the first 2 minutes and you're on your way. What you basically need here is the gateway. Like we talk about, there's gateway drugs that, you start smoking cigarettes and then it leads to other negative behaviors, right? Well, it's this kind of a similar thing that we're talking about here with habits. You establish the habit. You establish a gateway habit, like just read 1 page. And then from there, you try to improve on it. So like Miss what was her name? Twyla Tharp? Twyla Tharp, the greatest choreographer and dancer that we talked about in the first slide, and how she ritualized everything before the gym. Ritualize that first 2 minutes. Make it something insanely easy. Make it mindless, and the rest of it will follow. And if you need another piece of encouragement here, use this little 2-minute trick that James talks about. And this trick is to literally stop yourself from doing the habit after 2 minutes. So take the 2-minute the 2-minute rule super seriously, extra serious, and literally even if you can't even finish one page in 2 minutes, you get down, maybe you're almost done with the page, but it's 2 minutes and you have to stop yourself. I feel like this either does two things. This can, again, make things easy. You stop yourself after 2 minutes. You say to yourself, oh, that wasn't that bad. You do it, every few nights for a few times. You start to be consistent, and all of a sudden you're like, well, why don't I just read 5 pages? Oh, why don't I just read 6 pages? And you keep building on it from there and there. That's one scenario. Another scenario is that after 2 minutes, you stop yourself in the middle of an act. And then you start to get upset because all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, well, why did I stop here? Why not just keep going? So they're kind of both the same scenario. Either you steadily increase your habit, like if we're talking about reading a book, reading 10 pages from a book, either you steadily start to increase the habit over a period of time, or you do it right there in the spot if you try to stop yourself. Because you start to think, well, why stop now? I'm already here. And then, as James highlights here in that last bullet point, you end up casting votes for your new identity, and your new identity starts to take over. After you do it for 2 minutes, next thing you know, it's 5 minutes, next thing you know, it's 20, 30, now you're reading for an hour. Hell, you're like a quarter of a way through your book, or an eighth of the way through your book, or what have you. But it's just ritualizing that first 2 minutes. So what we've kind of been discussing here is something that James calls habit shaping, which is essentially building a habit off of the first 2 minutes and then incrementing it through intermediary goals. So your focus should be on the first 2 minutes, but then from there you keep advancing it until you reach the habit that you originally wanted. So if you want a goal of waking up at 6 a.m. every day, focus on the first 2 minutes. So let's not take this literally here, but you can just start by coming home at 9 p.m. every night. Okay, that's pretty simple, pretty easy. Next, an intermediary goal here would be to turn off all your devices, computer, cell phones, video games off by 9:30. Then the next goal from there would be to be in bed under the covers by 10 p.m. And then the last goal would be to set your alarm for 6 a.m. And that's how you form that habit. It's like you're sculpting it into what you eventually want to do, which is to wake up at 6 a.m. But you start with something super easy. Start with something that can be done again in the first 2 minutes. In this example, it's a little weird. First 2 minutes doesn't really make sense. We want to come home at a decent hour every night, right? But you get what I'm saying here. You start with the first 2 minutes. Start with something that's super easy, and then let the habit build from there. So again, to summarize, habits can be completed in seconds, but they continue for a long time after that. Now, think about when you just say, oh, I'm just going to go on my phone and just check my messages really quick. And then how often does that turn into, from checking your messages to checking your email to checking your social media accounts? Now you're scrolling through TikTok videos. It continues on long after that, because once you're on the freeway, it's hard to get off. So recognize that there's decisive moments where you need to make the correct decision, or else you're going to stay on the freeway and it's going to be hard to get off. And that's the same for a very negative habit, and it's the same for a positive habit. Now, You want to be on the freeway when it's a positive habit, and maybe not necessarily when it's a negative habit. So use this 2-minute rule. So a new habit should take less than 2 minutes to do. So realize that and ritualize that habit into a 2-minute set, into a 2-minute period, and then the rest of the habit follows. You can shape your habits from there, making intermediary goals. And again, the word here, standardize before optimize. And what was that? There was that really nice quote that I highlighted in one of the slides. Oh yeah. Habits are the entry point. They're not the end point. And you can use the 2-minute rule to your advantage. With that, guys, that's going to do it. Thank you very much for listening. This was a very powerful chapter, in my opinion, and really breaking it down into just the first 2 minutes, a very, very good way to make any habit easy. So, very cool chapter. Thank you guys very much for listening. Hopefully, you guys got a lot of value from this as well. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll be back next time with Atomic Habits. Again, my name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.